evening and welcome to Oatlands Park Hotel. My name's Gary Fester. I'm chairman of the Broadwater Conservation Society. Before I start talking, we're going to stop the video, and we've got a very brief small clip which I just want to show first. So
hello, I'm Ben Spencer, the Member of Parliament for Runnymede and Weybridge. I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's turned up to this event organised by the Broadwater Lake Conservation Society. Our outdoor spaces, this lake, is an absolute treasure, and I 100% support the work that a small group of volunteers and people passionate about a local environment are doing to support, to maintain and to improve the lake and its surrounding area for generations to come. So some parts of the lake are quite swampy, like around here, and around that's quite good for local amphibians, and it's really important to support them, you know, frogs, toads, newts. It's not great for the entire lake to be like that. There needs to be a good flow through of water. The lake, often parts of it dries up during the summer, and that's not good for local wildlife. If you go down that way a bit, there's an abandoned boat in the lake, and that needs to be pulled out. I had a great pleasure to meet Gary and Midge, to be shown around the lake and their ambitions going forwards to help make sure that it continues to be as beautiful and lovely as it is now. We can improve it so it's even better, so it doesn't dry up over the summer, and support our local wildlife. So thank you for coming to this event. I'm sorry I'm not able to be here in person, but I look forward to hearing what comes out of it and to support the work of the Society going forward. Thanks again, and look forward to hearing back.
right, thank you, Ben. Not that you can hear me. I think regardless of what flag you're going to fly at the next election and the council elections, it's always good to have the sitting Member of Parliament supporting local initiatives, and I think this is really good. And having met with Ben, he is enthusiastic about the lake and the area and Weybridge. We've also had some good wishes from Dominic Raab in Wharton, wishing us well. They're not here because Monday's a vote night apparently in Parliament, so they're on call for as necessary. I don't know if there's votes tonight, but anyway, we're pleased that he's involved. So thank you to him. But actually, more important than thanking him, I want to thank you a lot for turning out tonight on this cold, wet winter's night. When we first set this idea up to have this meeting way before Christmas, we were concerned how many would turn up. I mean, we thought about taking over one of the coffee shops in Wharton or Weybridge, and let's face it, there's lots of them, because we might only get a handful of people. And even 10 days ago, we had a smaller room in the hotel, which they have donated gratis for us, which is great, thinking that that took 50 or 60, and we rang them up about a week ago and said, we think we're going to get over 100, and we have, and we've got about 30 or 40 people who also wanted to come who couldn't. So because we know there's people that couldn't as well, we're actually filming this presentation tonight, because people have asked, oh, how do we see it? And through our website, if you've got somebody after it went, within a few days, hopefully, you'll get a link to see what's going on. So thank you. We really appreciate you turning up. I was so pleased when we went through the numbers. So anyway, we now are going on to which. So who is Broadwater Conservation Society? Well, the current team for Broadwater Conservation Society, and I'll say what, is Midge Connell there, who's our resident historian, who's going to be talking about the history of the lake. There's Annie Connell, her daughter-in-law, who, like me, was one of the founder members of the current BCS. And I'm going to call it BCS from now, otherwise we'll definitely run over time every time I keep saying Broadwater Conservation Society. And somewhere Charlotte's around, who's one of our, she's at the back, looking after things, people coming in late, Charlotte Saunders, and we're very honoured to have Bill Gush. Bill Gush is a Associate Director of Land and Water who did the report. Some of you would have read online, and he's going to talk about it and the upgraded bits of the report, and we really appreciate he's here tonight. I said at the beginning the current version of BCS. So in 1984, BCS was set up by, again, just local people who, some of which, like us, live along the lake, or with the help of the Weybridge Society, they set up BCS. That's their original logo. It's hand-drawn. It's not the greatest, but I just felt it's going to be our logo. We could have put a really sexy modern one on, and we've kept the original logo because we think it has a sort of honour about it. And we don't know how they got on. I believe I heard that the council did give them some money to do some work on the lake in bad areas and things that needed doing. But I also heard that it wasn't enough to sort of fix the whole lake up. And here we are now, nearly 40 years later. So that's the start of it. The next bit that goes on really takes us through, that I'm aware of, because obviously we're looking at ancient history, is actually in 2002. I'll come back to this later. In 2002, a lady called Leslie Birch, who lived in Beechcroft, decided that her flats were on the lake, that this was just awful, and the way it was going into rack and ruin, and she was trying to do something about it. And one of the things she found out at the time was that English Heritage has this lake on their register as a historic park. So that's English Heritage has got it on there. So she started a campaign at that time to, for want of a better word, badger the councillors to try and spend money. She used to, remember, she told me, walking along the path, the Broadwater path, and of course that now, even by 2002, was becoming quite treacherous, certainly in winter. So she was then starting things then. Now I found this in 2010. Someone said to me tonight, what's that mean, present state, 2010? Have you mistyped it? That is an old-fashioned paperboard with things stuck with glues and things that we found. And it's at the back. We've had it photographed so it can't all fall off, so please stop and have a closer look at it. I'm not going to linger on this, and you can't see the words anyway. But this was something they put together for presentations in 2010. It shows the lake all in a bad state, and it talks about it. There's shopping trolleys in there and everything else. So 13 years later, goodness knows what mess and how many shopping trolleys are in there now. So it's quite amazing. So Leslie carried on with a small team of people. Then it was she called it the Broadwater Lake Society. And she badgered on trying to get council to do things and so forth. And I presume lack of money, lack of will. It didn't happen. It doesn't matter why it didn't happen. It didn't happen. The next step with Leslie was back in 2015. 2015. She wrote to Prince Charles, literally wrote a letter. It's quite sweet. Prince Charles saying, "Dear Prince Charles, this is the letter she got back. She got, we need some help. It's your ancestors that own this lake. You've got the Prince's Trust. Can you give us some money and see if we can help us patch it up?" The letter came back, very sweet. She was pleased but disappointed that Charles hadn't signed it himself. I think if Charles had signed it, I'd now be putting it on eBay now he's king, and selling it for lots of money along with the Beatles' signatures. But anyway, so it says, "I regret the Royal Highness's position makes it difficult to become personally involved." He then tells her to contact the Prince's Foundation for the buildings, so which she did. And they sent somebody round and had a look, and they came back to her and said, "We can't get involved for no other reason," I think there would have been other reasons, "that the lake is not for the enjoyment of everyone, only for people who live on it, because you can't walk along that path. And certainly in winter, you're taking your life in your hands." And they said, "So we can't even consider it." That put Leslie into overdrive. She went completely over the top with it, badgering the council like crazy. I hadn't met her then, so this is hearsay on this. And however, I did, having met her in 2017, go along to the meeting. And some of you I know were at that meeting, where the council then said, yes, okay. Surrey County Council and Elmbridge did say, yes, we will, we'll fund the path and we will maintain the path. And late in 2017, the path opened. And I presume that most of you here, just by being here at some point, have walked along that path. So that was one of the big turning points. And we got all excited. And I remember going to a house with Annie Connell. I think there was one of the councillors there, I can't remember who, I'll be honest, and a couple of other interested parties, one of which has passed away and one has moved away from the area. And she was talking about good old-fashioned leaflet dropping and knocking on doors and using the cubs to put leaflets through flat doors and rallying support. And I said, well, hang on a minute. We need to form a company. We need a direct managing director, we need a chairman, we need a secretary, we need a website, and we need to know what we're talking about. And she hugged me and said, we've just found our managing director and chairman in Gary. Annie, you can be secretary, I'll be treasurer. We had no money, nothing to treasure. And we'll get on with it. So we formed a company, we opened a bank account, we started on the website. This is classic, and we are amateurs. I've got nothing, no, don't even think. My whole career has been in financial services. And so I had no idea to do conservation societies and anything else. Anyway, the first mistake we made, we put this nearly finished OK website together. We hadn't released it yet. And the poor chap that I said had passed away, he was an older gentleman, he had all the codes. We didn't even know who he was with. So we couldn't redo it, so we had to re-buy the name back. Of course, that had gone up because someone had used it and ended up being surrendered back, to rebuy the name back and put the website together again and start to get all of this going. So that was the sort of the major turning point. And we then realised that what we needed to do was to get someone to tell us what needs doing and what it's going to cost. We hadn't got a clue. We don't even knew what it was doing. We just knew it doesn't feel right. You could see it wasn't right. So I rang around lots of companies, and most didn't want to quote, didn't want to look at it. One quoted me £4,000 to go and fix the lake because they looked on Google Maps and said, yeah, we can do that. We'll pop along. It costs, we'll come. So then we got some professionals to come along and talk to us and say, right, this is what needs doing, and we can do your report. And I said, great, when do you want to do it? Well, we're going to talk about the costs. And I thought, well, we can probably get some money together. At that point, I think we had £600 in the bank, donated by a few housing estates, including where I live. And the quotes came in at £20,000 to £30,000 to do the report. I think I imagine it like if you go to build around to paint the house, and they say, oh yeah, all right, well, it'll be somewhere between 3,000 or 4,000 we can start. And they said it'll take many months to get that report done because we've got to watch nesting birds when we come into the water, we've got silt to check, we've got laboratories to be involved. So we didn't know what to do to raise the money. And one of the councillors told Leslie, there's the community infrastructure levy, which the council gives money to charities, scouts, boys clubs, etc., for non-profit. We're a non-profit organisation. So we were allowed to put a pitch, show the what we'd come across, and after a few months anyway, they had granted it that we could have the money, and they backed the most expensive quote, which is with Land and Water, which was the one we wanted, and we told them we wanted it, and they agreed. They knew Land and Water, they'd worked for them before, they're respected, they're local, and the report was head and shoulders above the other. They could see that they knew what they're doing. So now we've got a report. Well, it took a few months to get the report. One of the reasons it took a few months because something called COVID came along, just as all that was starting. So COVID came along, it all got stopped, then it got started again, and eventually the report turned up. I'm just going to check when it turned up in 2020. The report, February 21, the report came out. Poor Leslie had lost her life. She passed away before Christmas after a long illness, so she wasn't around. And we were starting to get ready. And I only mention this because it's to tell you why we've been delayed. And 2 months later, I was diagnosed with myeloma bone cancer. So there was a committee of Annie and I, and we'd lost the heart and soul of it as well. And I took 14 months to get into remission through transplants and broken bones and chemo and everything else that goes with getting over cancer. So I tell you that because you might be thinking, well, hang on a minute, you got this money, you got this report, and it's all, why are we taking all these years later? So last May, June, I was sort of okay, and we started to revamp the thing. And in revamping everything, we got the website done properly, and here we are today. So this is where this is sort of how we've got here. So what is our vision? That slide's wrong. This should be what is your vision and our vision. So next time we'll change that. Yeah, it's a John vision. I don't know what fully our vision is. I'm no more qualified for a vision on this than anyone sitting in the audience. I'm sure there's, or I'm not sure, there might be some people who totally disagree with us touching the lake at all. And if it is, let's talk about that and find out where we go. I'm sure there's different attitudes of what could be done with it. The vision to me, more than anything, is not to have that lake dry up. Look at that 2010 poster, and I say it was going on then. It says there that in 2010, in the summer, it got down to 3 inches deep. During COVID, Leslie's husband and a friend of his, who are in their 70s, put on woolly boots and walked across the lake from Beechcroft, near Beechcroft. I'm not sure exactly where, sure. That lake, it will dry up in the heat. We've got heat. We had the same happened here. When it floods, it goes where it wants. Someone said to me, well, that's what lakes do, you know, let it go. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to run, and it's supposed to run towards the Thames. The water runs in off the road with all the oil and muck from the road, and it's supposed to have good filters that catches it. There are filters. I don't know how good they are yet now, and of course, we've got all the trees. So many more trees. I walk the lake. I live on the end of the lake in Lakeside. As part of my fitness regime, I do a 4-mile walk around the lake and the river about 3 or 4 times a week. And over the weeks, more trees are falling in, more junk is falling in. Some people, I think, here tonight told us they know of 2 dogs that fell in and drowned because it's like quicksand in bits of it. I fell in 9 years ago when we first moved in there. My dog ran in the water. I got in the water to get it out, and there I was up to here. And the more I moved, the deeper I went with this. It looked like a bank. I hadn't gone in the water. I'd stepped on a bank and gotten straight in. All that kept going through my mind is the dog always gets out. And the dog did get out. And luckily I got out as well. So the lake is crying out for something. And we're going to talk more about what the professionals think that something is. So really that's the vision to date. We're going to have a rather wonderful history lesson. I'm sure I've not read the report, but I'm very honoured that Mitch Connell came on the board with us, and she has been a tour de force. Without her, this meeting actually wouldn't have got in tonight. She has done so much for this meeting, and she's done so much for the checking the history and so forth. So I'm pleased you put your hands together and welcome Mitch Connell.
Right, good evening, everyone. This account of the history of the site is necessarily brief, but it is important to show why Broadwater Lake, Oatlands Park Hotel and Templemere Wood are recorded in the National Heritage for England's Register of Parks and Gardens of Special Historic Interest. The story begins with Henry VIII. Oatlands was a manor house which Henry acquired in 1538. His third wife, Jane Seymour, had died the year before at Hampton Court, shortly after giving birth to their son and heir, Edward. Henry began an exhaustive search for his fourth wife, and he wanted a palace for this new queen in an area upstream from Hampton Court within his favourite hunting grounds. As we know, he married Anne of Cleves, but she did not find favour and was swiftly divorced and pensioned off. His eye had already alighted on the teenage Catherine Howard, and they were married just 19 days after the divorce at Oatlands Palace. This is the image of what Henry had built. In the centre, there is a remarkable prospect tower, which is said to have provided a viewing gallery for the Queen and her ladies to watch the hunt. The gate and the section of the wall which we have remaining today is this one, which led into the outer court, and then after that there is the middle court, and then the royal apartments, the Queen's apartments on the left, the King's on the right, each with their own garden. And then you see the River Thames behind. Where was the palace? Not where we are this evening, obviously, but a short distance to the west. Excavations from the 1960s through to the 80s have revealed the grand plan, which is here superimposed on today's map of the local area. So we're coming down Grotto Road here. This is St James's School. And if you carry on along Grotto Road, you're going through the royal apartments to the end there, and up to the top is Greenlands Road. And then on this map you can see what is Broadwater Lake today. I would find it quite a thrill if I was sitting on a sofa in 20-something Grotto Road to think that just a few feet below might be the ground on which King Henry and Catherine Howard stood to exchange their ill-fated marriage vows. Queen Elizabeth and Mary I both enjoyed Oatlands, but it was James I's Queen, Anne of Denmark, for whom it was a particular favourite. Here is her portrait in the Royal Collection, with Oatlands Palace in the background. Anne updated the interiors of the palace and commissioned the court architect, Inigo Jones, to design this great gate, which you can see shining in the stone next to the brick there. So Anne was very proud of that. Anne also had a silkworm house built and planted a vineyard. Charles I's French wife, Henrietta Maria, also loved Oatlands. She updated the facilities, making Oatlands the most comfortable of all the royal houses at the time. But her passion was for the gardens. She employed John Tredescant, who was the botanist, plant hunter and collector, along with his son of the same name, to create and care for her gardens. You may have a Tradescantia in your houseplant collection. Charles's youngest son, in fact, Henry, Duke of Gloucester, was born at Oatlands, and there's a very old cedar of Lebanon tree in the grounds here, which is said to have been planted to celebrate his birth. Charles I lost his head, and Oliver Cromwell became Lord Protector. He liked Hampton Court, but ordered the demolition of Oatlands Palace. After the restoration of Charles II in 1660, his mother, Henrietta Maria, returned from France. Oatlands estate was restored to her, but as there was no palace, much of her remaining life was spent at the Queen's house in Greenwich. From 1660, the land remained in the hands of the Crown, but was leased to various noblemen. In 1720, it came into the hands of Henry Pelham Clinton, 7th Earl of Lincoln. He built a house on the site where we are now, some 300 years ago, and ordered the grounds to be laid out in the then fashionable French style, inspired by the glories of Versailles. This print, which is dated 1737, shows what he created. Here is the house, obviously, and there is the house on the plan. And down to the north of it, you've got this spectacular terrace with circular areas at each side, and then you have this sharp slope with banks that you can walk down, and then at the bottom you have a cruciform canal, which is very Versailles. And beyond the cruciform canal, you've got more parkland, little walkways here, a little forested area, and that looks like another water feature there. This artist, Bartholomew Roque, and his brother were also at this time recording the new gardens at Claremont and Paynes Hill and Esher Place, contemporary creations whose owners had the same desire for a grand landscape park. The 9th Earl of Lincoln was the younger brother of the 7th and 8th Earls. He inherited very young and grew up fascinated by gardening, devoting more time to this than his political responsibilities. This was only a few years later, was the period when the English garden style became the thing that everyone wanted. The formal French style, planting was swept away and landscapes were engineered to look natural and free-flowing. Follies, temples and grottos were added to create the ideal vistas seen in the paintings of Claude Lorraine and experienced by the grand tourists in Italy. This sketch plan indicates how Oatlands Park would have been laid out for the 9th Earl by the end, when it was completed in 1775. The canal has gone. We're looking from the south here. The canal has gone. There is a less defined terrace and slope, and most remarkable of all is the creation of the Broadwater, 3/4 of a mile long feature. As well as the Broadwater, there were the additional edifices, the Doric Temple, just here, and then you've got the Temple of Venus here, the Temple of Vesta, that little dot, and the grotto, various other things, ice house, menagerie, and even a bowling green. This vision of Arcadia was achieved with the advice and design skills of such men as Lord Burlington and William Kent, who were both friends of the Earl. And the lake itself was formed to have a trompe-l'oeil effect, as if it joined the Thames and flowed under Walton Bridge. This beautiful print, again with the date of the 1770s, shows a view of the lake from the south looking across to what was called the Temple of Venus, here. It shows the area where Broadwater Path is now, here. And beyond that, Bannatyne's Health Club and the Weybridge Equestrian Centre, back here. It's a lovely thing, it's full of chinoiserie detail. In 1790, the Duke of York, who was the younger brother of George III, bought the freehold to the estate. He and his wife, the Prussian Crown Princess, enjoyed the house and grounds, inviting weekend guests for house parties and entertainments on the lake and at the grotto. The Duchess, a much more retiring type than her husband, stayed at Oatlands during the week, keeping an extraordinary menagerie of animals and taking a keen interest in the welfare of the children of Weybridge. And she, of course, is remembered at Monument Green. This bucolic view is from the north bank, looking back across the lake to Oatlands House, where we are today, as it was then. And here is a view of the grotto, which had its own miniature lake, more of a pond, in front of it. The grotto was constructed over the period of years and was perfected by the same specialist builders, Joseph Lane and Son of Tisbury, who made the spectacular grotto at Painshill Park. And there remains today, here in the trees by Broadwater Lake, a ruined archway right down by the lake, perhaps the last edifice of all these picturesque follies at the park. After the death of the Duchess, the Duke sold the estate to a notorious gambler, Edward Hughes Ball Hughes. He had to flee to France to escape his creditors, and the estate was eventually divided into lots and sold off, the first of several subdivisions of the land in coming years. In 1856, the house became a hotel. Early distinguished guests included Emile Zola, Edward Lear, and Anthony Trollope. This is a section of an Ordnance Survey map of 1868. It shows the lake here, and it shows what is now Oatlands Park Hotel there, which we're all very familiar with. And there is the grotto. Now, the grotto, sadly, was eventually demolished after World War II, having become, through neglect, an unsafe ruin, apparently latterly used as target practice by the New Zealand soldiers convalescing at the hotel during the war. Interestingly, this map also shows to the east of the hotel the private houses that were built on purchased ground along the lake. Here we have a big house called the Vale, which is where Farrington Acres is now, at the end of Vale Road here. Then we have Beechcroft, name of the house, where Beechcroft Manor apartments are now. And then we have the Temple, where indeed Temple Mere development is now. And this I found very interesting. This is an engraving of the folly, one of the follies at the estate in Oatlands Park, called the Temple. And there it is in probably as a 19th century engraving. And here is that house called the Temple, built on the site of Temple Mere. And you can see that they've either incorporated the folly or perhaps drawn inspiration from it. But it's fascinating how the similarity is clear. So today the landscape of the lake is different. Trees have grown up to obscure some of the views, but it is still a wonder, longer than the Serpentine in London, with special natural habitats for wildlife. Along the south bank are private houses, apartments, and of course the Oatlands Park Hotel. On the north bank is the Broadwater Path, created in 2017 and maintained to a width of 5 metres either side, well, across, by Elmbridge Borough Council for the benefit of us all. But as we're all going to continue, if we're all going to continue to enjoy this precious and very historic lake, we need to act. So I'm going to pass over now to Bill Gush of Land and Water. Thank you.
Well, follow that, as they say. Well, yes, first of all, I'm Bill Gush from Land and Water, and for my sins, I wrote the report that some of you might have read. But tonight, I've come here to give you a slight précis of that. One thing I'm not going to do is to tell you what you need to do, because I think that's entirely up to you, but I will give you some options. And that's how we're going to go ahead. So, contents, basically I'm going to show you some of the condition of the lake as it is now. I'm sure a lot of you will know and have seen some of the photographs that I have here. Then I'll give you some restoration options, and at the end, a budget for what those options will cost. So, one of the problems you've got, and you've heard about all night, is this amount of silt that's in the lake. These photographs were taken at the eastern end, which is the downstream end, and where the lake should flow out of the bottom. You can see the amount of silt. This was taken 2 or maybe even 3 years ago, and I understand last year it was even drier than this. So you will have seen more silt than I could see at that time. And you also see the amount of trees that are fallen in. The amount of silt is preventing boating, it's giving you poor water quality, and it's affecting, particularly in the summer, the fish health that you have in the lake. At the eastern end, you should have a functioning spillway, which is now the photograph on the left, and you can see that's not functioning very well at all. It's completely dried up. What you do have is an overflow channel that's acting as the outflow from the lake at the moment. Now, you probably recognise that bridge that's been put in there quite recently. Certainly since I did the first survey, that picture was taken just the other day when I was down here. So one of the problems you've got at the moment is that the water level in the lake, even when it's at its normal level, is lower than it should be. So if it could be raised up to the level of the spillway, then you'll add probably another 300 mil to the depth of your water. That's before you do any dredging. So you've got existing drainage. You see the inflow from the southern side, and there's a further inflow, and there's several other inflows, including the main one that's right at the western end, which flows through all those trees that you know about. My talk doesn't talk about the silted up end at the western end. I think that's probably best left as it is. If you do too much to that and remove too many of the trees, all that's going to do is release even more silt down from the western end into the lake as you've got there. And it is a habitat that is quite unique probably to the area around here. Sorry, I missed here on the right, on the other photograph there, of course, is the erosion of the bank, which is done by birds, geese climbing in and out, dogs climbing in and out, all the way along the northern side of the lake. So there's just 2 examples of the trees that are fallen down into the lake. And should you remove all of them? That's a question that I think you need to ask yourselves as well. Some of them do need to be pulled out, that's for sure. Some of them are giving really nice perches for birds to sit on and fish from. So there is a very valid argument to leave some of those in because they are giving a benefit to the bird life. But some of them also will collect debris, particularly those with a lot of branches into the water, as you see the one on the right. And so there's probably an argument to remove some of those. So that like all things in life, there's a balance. And there's not many places along the northern bank where you can stand, let alone sit, and admire the view. So there are some, but there are also some really nice views as well. The picture at the bottom, photo at the bottom, was taken towards the western end, where there's a particular tree which gives you a complete canopy all the way around. I don't know if you know the one I mean, but to be able to sit there and look out would be really nice. But it would be nice to have a little safe area to stand and maybe a seat or two. But you don't want all those all the way down, just every now and again. So two of the things we had to do when we did our survey was, one, to survey the lake in terms of depth of water and the depth of the silt. This is just one of 16, I think, drawings that we've got. And I've just given it, shown you as an example, and you probably can't see because it's in colour, but there are contours in here. And this is at the eastern end, which is the downstream outfall end. So the downstream, if you like, the broken spillway is about here, and that's where the footbridge is at the moment. In here, this is the deepest part of the lake, and it's about 1 metre. And it's just in that part of the lake. Now, there are three drawings like this, if you like, one there, one down there, and one over there. That gives you the complete length of the lake. And it's just this section here where you have 1 metre of water. By the time you get to the end of this drawing, there's about 700 mil, then 500. And when I had to go out there with a boat with a colleague to take some silt samples, we just put the oars in the ground and stopped because our oars were in the mud. You couldn't go any further, really, than this area here. We did manage, sorry, I've gone backwards. We did manage to get samples from a variety of places all the way up, which was the second survey we had to do. So in the second survey, we took silt samples. When you dredge a lake, as soon as you lift the sediment out of the lake, it becomes a waste. So it comes under the waste regulations, which are run by the Environment Agency. So you have to classify what sort of waste it is. And for this type of waste, it's either hazardous, non-hazardous, or it's inert. Now, there's very little that's inert in a lake because any vegetation in it gives it a very high level of organic material, which means it can't be inert. But luckily, there wasn't enough hazardous material in here to call it hazardous either. So it is non-hazardous sediment, which means that it doesn't have to go to hazardous landfill. It could go to non-hazardous, or it can be reused in or around the site. And I'll come on to that a little bit later. So restoration options, I've divided this into two. One is the bank and structural repairs, and the other one is the dredging side of things. So I mentioned, everybody's mentioned the amount of rubbish in the lake, and I've seen quite a bit of it. So one of the things that we would need to do is remove all of that rubbish. The weir or the spillway needs to be reinstated. As I said, if we reinstate that, and if we dredge the material that's in front of it and lift the level at what should be the outflow, then you'll get another 300 mil of water. So from my point of view, I think that's probably a priority to do. Tree clearance, that's a big question. How many of those trees do you want to take out because they've fallen in? How many of the standing trees do you want to take down because you want a better view? That's not for me to say. That's for you to decide. Bank repairs. There are a number of places along the bank that need repairing. It's not a massive job. It's quite straightforward to do those repairs. Some of the silt that comes from the lake can go in behind those repairs. It's not going to use an awful lot of silt, but at least it's some of it. And then they can be grassed up, or they can be planted with aquatic plants. All the inlets and all the outfalls do need to be inspected to check for the filters that Gary spoke about, to make sure they're working properly. So that needs to carry out, and obviously any repairs that need to be carried out need to be done as well. There's nothing that I could see that was urgent in those. They all did seem to be functioning reasonably well. And then there's the viewing areas. How many of those do you want along that northern side? How big do you want them? Do you want seats in all of them? Do you want some of them you could probably make out of cut down tree stumps made into seats, that sort of thing. And I mentioned here dipping jetties, and I know the school at the far end were interested in dipping jetties, and you can have a dipping jetty which is one plank by the side of the bank, or you can have a huge structure. So there's dipping jetties and there's dipping jetties, if you see what I mean. Some of them could be quite cheap, quite economic, I should say, so that a few children could safely stand on some planking to do some dipping with nets. I wouldn't put them in the western end. I think there is one that started to be put in there, which you could finish that one off. But I would put them where, if it is anyone's going to fall in, it's safe for them to climb out as well. And then environmental improvements, we have already done quite a bit of work in the lake, removing excessive amounts of reeds. Reeds are good, but reeds are they grow at their own speed, as you know. So they do need to be kept back, but they're very good plants to have in a lake. There are other equally good plants that don't spread quite as much. And I mentioned those other aquatic planting. So I just want to talk about 3 options for the dredging. And there's no doubt that the dredging and the disposal of dredging is the more expensive part of the work. This is what I would almost call as the minimum amount of dredging that you need to do. You can see here is where the outfall should be, but you can see already that all that area there is silted up, and that area under there is, you can see it during the summer, it's exposed. That's the spillway that's working at the moment, but that one needs to be lifted in level, and that one needs to be rebuilt and put in the correct level, and all this material taken out so that that end of the lake works properly. So the second option is a navigation channel. This will allow boats to get back onto the lake again, at least for the width of the channel. And that, again, as I said, that's one of 3 drawings. That's a third of the lake, there's another third there, and there's another third there, before you get to the very shallow wooded area at the western end. And so I've suggested that you can put a navigation channel all the way through the lake for boats to go on, if that's what you want to do. And fishing. I think there is an interest in fishing in the lake. There's no reason why there shouldn't be an adequate stock of fish, but they will flounder at the moment during the summer with the depth of water that they've got. So you need a water depth of at least 1.5 metre, 1.7, 1.8 metres, so that in the winter they've got somewhere deeper to go if it does freeze over, and you also need areas along the bank where they can spawn safely. So one of the other options is to put a number of fish pools in. This is just 2. I think I've shown 2 more elsewhere on other drawings. So here's some statistics. The total volume of sediment in the lake is 37,000 cubic metres. Now, nobody is suggesting that we take all of that out. In fact, I think it would be a bad thing if we took it all out. You do need to leave some there. The waterway, all waterways in the UK have a classification. They're either on a main river, and that as a main means something to the Environment Agency, or they're not, and they're called ordinary watercourses. So this is an ordinary watercourse, so it comes under the jurisdiction of the local council in terms of permitting. As you've heard already, it's a registered Parks and Garden, and Temple Estate is designated a conservation area in 2017. So you have something on your side to prevent, to help to keep this as a good registered park. As I mentioned already, the silt is classified as non-hazardous, which is quite significant in terms of any disposal or reuse that would result from the dredging. And of the 3 options that I've put forward for the dredging, the navigation option is 12,000 cubic metres, which is by far the biggest volume to be removed. The water quality and to reconnect the spillway is 3,725 cubic metres. This was 3 years ago, no doubt there's a little bit more now. And for this fish pools, about 1,700 cubic metres. So here comes the money. I've updated this. This is like today's figures, and obviously subject to detail. So it's just to give you all an idea of the sort of money we're talking about. Just to set up on site to get accesses to the site to be able to lift equipment in, and to design them and to get all the consents from the various statutory authorities. 37,000. To clear the rubbish, 11,000. remove selected fallen trees. Well, that's 18,000 is as a guess, but it might be less or it might be more depending on how many trees need to be pulled out. Restructuring of the bank. Now that could be zero, or it could be 120,000. What I was trying to do is to create as many places along the bank that we could build in order to put silt behind them, so that it would offset the cost of taking silt away from site. So that looks like quite a lot, but it's nothing compared to what you would have to pay if you had to take it off site. But on the other hand, if we could find somewhere else to put it, then that would come down to a few £1,000s just to do those small sections where the dogs were damaging the bank. Inspection and a guess at what repairs would be necessary for all the inlets that exist on site, 12,000. Repair the spillway. Environmental improvements, that's mainly the replanting and the control of the reeds. Two dipping jetties. Again, that's at the top end. You could do something much cheaper than that if you wanted to, and that's 2 of them. And then there's allowance for aquatic planting and a maintenance manual. I think what's needed. I should add that none of this all doesn't have to happen at the same time, so you can do it in stages. But what I think is important that a maintenance manual was put together so that people know how to keep it as it's been established, and that might mean setting up your own works teams to do the simple things. Anyway, that's the money to put that together. But the big money comes for the dredging, and that's assuming, and this is a big assumption, that we can find somewhere local to reuse the silt. Silt can be put on farmland. Silt can be put behind retaining structures. Silt can even be used in construction, although I'm not anticipating that's probably possible around here, but certainly there's farmland around here. So that assuming that we could get rid of that, the 12,000 cube for the navigation is just over 300,000. The environmental dredging, which is the dredging up near the outfall, 96,000, and the fish pools, 44,000. So you can see that's where the big money is. That, I'm afraid, was the bad news at the end.
Thank you, Bill. And just to stress, Bill's done a lot of work on this time again. I mean, we paid him for work years ago. He's put a few hours into this. He's here tonight, and we'll do other things. And he's not pitching for the job. He'd like the job. I think we'd like to use them. If we manage to get someone to fund this, and I'll talk briefly about that in a minute, chances are they might want to say, we've got some people we've used. Certainly they would want re-tendering. He'd be one of probably 3 people tendering and writing reports. So and just an extra thanks, because this isn't a pitch to win a job or anything else. And there's been, a couple of hours with us the other day on the lake, and obviously a few hours to put all this together and research and so forth. So it's a big thank you as well. So thank you. The big question, money. Yeah, we've got no money. I would genuinely say if anyone wants to make small donations, and I'm talking just to give us a bit more of fun to pay for things, even this evening with the free room, it's cost us money to put things together, as you can imagine, just to run these things. But I mean, we don't take anything out, we don't take expenses out, and anyone that does work for us is actually usually a friend of the family or a family member that works cheap and puts things together. So we're aware of that. This isn't a business. So, but if anyone wants to make donations, we've everything we've ever had has been a donation. We had a couple of anonymous ones in the last 12 months, say one for £2,000, one for £500. A lot of that has got spent in sorting things out for tonight. So The big money, private enterprise is a thought, I don't know. Unfortunately, if there was some big national company that had their head office on the lake waters or something, I'm sure we would be able to get money because they would feel the need to do it. A couple of people have mentioned some of the head offices that are in Brooklands that might be worth approaching, and we might get some money out. But we're looking for big money. We imagine that the right places to go could be the lotteries, and I don't mean the National Lottery, they're looking after charities and things, but the heritage lotteries, there are a number. A number of these heritage companies have vast funds going back hundreds and hundreds of years, and if there's the historic links to them may be the answer to this, and that's what we're kind of hoping. Thank you again for coming. I really appreciate everyone turning up and showing interest. I've got a few extra people to thank, apart from the hotel again, which is great, and Ben. Pollington's newest agents, thank you. I think someone's here from Pollington's, but they managed to put our leaflets in their newspapers and all that for free, which was very nice. A lady called Mary Hammond's here. I haven't met her. She runs what I think is the best little local magazine. This is the Brooklands and Weybridge Life, and she did a feature for us. There she is. If you want to say hello to Mary, stand up, Mary, please, and thank you. And she's also happy to do a follow-up article, I believe, next month on what's happened tonight, which is fantastic. And what else have I got? I know there's a lot of councillors here, so thank you for attending, and I appreciate that the interest you're showing. Couple of small ones. My daughter Carly, who put together the website, which was great, and that's her main business. She did it virtually free. My son-in-law who filmed the video for us, and he's on camera tonight, so I'd just like to thank him. That's really about as many thanks as I want to put on tonight. Someone came out to me the other day and said, "So you're trying to save Henry VIII's lake, are you?" And I was, true. So said to me, "So you're the Thomas Cromwell of the gig, are you?" And I thought, well, that's interesting, until I remembered that Thomas Cromwell failed and got beheaded for failing. So let's not mention Thomas Cromwell again. And I was thinking earlier, I said the name's a bit long, the Broadwater conservation. I'm hoping that in a year or two, when we've sorted this out, we can call it the Conservation and Preservation Society. I'd like to read just one thing, an email we got this evening, from someone who didn't think they could make it. And it just, last words, they're not my words. About time to get the lake sorted out. The lake water is filthy and smells like sewage. How wonderful that it's going to be nurtured, we hope. Let's hope the lake can be brought back to its former glories. And I'm going to end on that, and thank you again for coming.